Do not worry. Do not worry. Jesus tells us this in the Bible. We see it in Matthew chapter 6 when he's talking. He's saying, you cannot serve two masters. And he's saying, you cannot serve God and mammon. And then he comes out in Matthew 6:25. He says, therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life. Do not worry about your life. What you will wear, what you will eat. Is not your life more than food and more than clothes? So, but how does that look? What's the reality of the world that we live in today? If we look at what's really going on in the world around us, and how are people living? Are people living without worry as recommended by Jesus, or have they found a better way or a different way? Well, let's take a look real quickly here at a few of the top worries. There's so many, but just take a look at the ones that we see all the time. People worry about being overweight, getting old, their financial future, getting a new job or meeting goals in their current job, debt, paying the rent. The list goes on and on. And so there are so many worries that people have, and the causes are many, or the effects are many. It affects our health, our happiness, our relationships with God, and causing arguments, lost confidence, sleeplessness, and the list of effects goes on. And so, how could this be? Why is it nobody's taking the words of Jesus seriously? Was it downplayed in the Bible as just a throwaway statement, do not worry, sort of a glib statement? Or was that meant to be taken very seriously? So let's just take a look at the Bible and see just how relevant and important this particular command is to God himself. Now, in Numbers, the chapter of Numbers, we've got the children of Israel approaching the promised land. Now Moses sends out the 12 spies. They spy out the land. They come back with a report. And the report from 10 of the 12 is gloomy. It's a gloomy report. Yes, the land is rich. It's filled with milk and honey. But the people there are numerous, and they're giants. We're like grasshoppers next to these people. Forget about it. We'll never take the land. It's hopeless. And all the people are totally distraught when they hear this report because they realize that indeed this is a hopeless situation. But two of the spies give a totally different report. Caleb and Joshua. They saw the same places that the other spies did. They have the same evidence, and yet their report was very different. They said, let us go up and take that hill, for we are well able to overcome it. Let us go up and take it, for we are well able to overcome it. These spies were speaking God's will. God told them to go take the land. These two spies had faith, and their report was optimistic. But unfortunately, the people bought in to the gloomy, the hopeless 10 spies. They bought into the negative report, the weak report. And so, how did God feel about that? The people worried and they feared. And they bought into that negative report. So what does God say? In Numbers 14, 28 and 29. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very thing I heard you say. In this wilderness your bodies will fall. Every one of you, 20 years old or more, who was counted in the census and who has grumbled against me. So God is saying, okay, I'm going to give you what you say. You said it's hopeless. You're all going to die in the desert. I'll give you what you say. In fact, elsewhere in Proverbs 18:21 reads, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that eat it, they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Our words have power. And God says, you want to go against, you want to choose worry over faith? I'll give you what you want. You can have it. You speak it, you can have what you want. And they all died in the desert. The entire generation died in the desert. Only two men in that entire generation lived to enter the promised land, and those were the two spies, Joshua and Caleb. Now, there's another example in the scriptures, which is King Saul. Now, King Saul was God's chosen king. God's chosen king. And yet, when God told King Saul to attack the Amalekites and utterly destroy them, even all the livestock, everybody, and this judgment was brought on the Amalekites because they were evil, they were sinners, and God gave King Saul a command. It was a hard command, and yet King Saul took it very seriously. He did not blow off this command at all. In fact, he attacked the Amalekites and he wiped them out utterly, just as he was ordered to do, with a couple of exceptions. He allowed the king, Agag, to live. He took him as a prisoner, and they wiped out most of the livestock, but they saved the best livestock. Now, why did King Saul go along with this? This really was not what God had said. God had said, destroy them utterly, not with any exceptions. And King Saul explains why he did this in 1 Samuel 15:24. But the people took the spoil, the sheep, the oxen, the chief things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice unto the Lord. So it seems like it was a good purpose. They saved the best sheep to sacrifice unto the Lord. Surely the Lord would be pleased, right? Except that's not what the Lord said. And Samuel said, hath the Lord great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? So Samuel is saying, is God more happy that you are making these sacrifices, or that you're being obedient? Behold, to obey is better than to sacrifice. Very serious words in the Bible. To obey is better than sacrifice. And then, and Saul, skipping down to 1 Samuel 15:24, and Saul said unto Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and thy words, because I feared the people. Why did Saul not obey God? Because of fear. He feared something. In this case, he feared the people. So fear, the opposite of faith, fear causes Saul to disobey God and to go along with his own people's plan of disobedience. And as a result of that, Saul is set on a path towards losing his power over his people. King David is anointed in his place because Saul did not obey the Lord. Fear ruined him. Fear ruined King Saul's reign and destroyed it. And so there are other examples. Take Pontius Pilate in the New Testament. Pontius Pilate obviously is known as the man who crucified Christ, even though he knew he was innocent and said so. And why did he do this? Because he feared the people. He feared the unruly mob. And so he washed his hands of it and sent Jesus to the cross. Fear of the people caused him to send Jesus to the cross. What would we not do because of fear? How misguided could we be because of fear and worry? What will we do? How extreme will we get? In the case of Pontius Pilate, he sent Jesus to the cross when he knew he was innocent. Why? He probably feared something terrible for himself if he didn't. Now, this is so important in our life, in our daily walk with Jesus Christ. And we see this in the New Testament, in Matthew chapter 14, when Jesus is walking on water and Peter wants to walk out to him, and he's walking towards Jesus. And he walked on water towards Jesus. But in Matthew 14:30 reads, but when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was walking on water, but then he saw the wind was boisterous, and what happens? He was afraid. Fear sets in because of something, in this case, the wind, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. So what happened there? What happened there? He was walking on water, and he took his eyes off of Jesus, and he looked at the mountain rather than the mountain mover. He looked at the obstacle rather than the Savior. He looked at the wind, the source of worry and fear. He took his eyes off Jesus, and he started to sink. And then he cries out to Jesus. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And so, in our own walk with Jesus, we need to keep our eyes on the Lord, and we don't want to take our eyes off the Lord and start worrying and focusing on the source of our worry. But we got to just be like Peter, and don't be like Peter and take our eyes off Jesus and sink because we're focusing on the problem rather than the Savior. No, let's keep our eyes on Jesus, and the mountain shrinks as our salvation expands and is magnified. Do not worry. Do not worry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on our next report.